response was something the former president has been saying a lot lately and what it says about him. Sunday, as President Biden was visiting the American Military Cemetery outside Paris and fresh from marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day at Normandy, Donald Trump was saying this.
There's never been people treated more horrifically than J6 hostages. But those J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened. All they were doing is protesting a rigged election. That's what they were doing. And then the police say, go in, go in, go in, go in. What a setup that was.
That's the former president of the United States Sunday in Las Vegas. And just to refresh your memory, these are the people he was honoring. Specifically called these people hostages.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the horribly and unfairly treated January 6th hostages.
It's now part of his routine. That recording he's standing and saluting for features him saying the Pledge of Allegiance while these inmates, whom he calls hostages, sing the Star-Spangled Banner. By the way, the former president began calling them hostages in November after actual hostages were taken by Hamas, 4 of whom were freed in a daring military operation in Gaza after almost 8 months of mental and physical torment at the hands of Hamas, and we'll have more on that tonight. But those are actual hostages. Trump would have you believe the January 6th inmates are hostages and also warriors and victims. He said that too. Victims, he also claims, were invited in by police. So they're warriors and they're hostages and they're victims and they're also, according to him, lovers.
The love in the air, I've never seen anything like it. There was also a love fest between the police, the Capitol Police, and the people that walked down to the Capitol.
So stir that in with all the rest. And here's how the former president is reshaping the attack on the Capitol. Peaceful protesters, full of love, invited into the Capitol by police who loved them in return, but who somehow tricked them and made them victims, who then turned into warriors who are now being held hostage. Let me introduce you to one of these men, who is presumably a warrior in Trump's eyes, Daniel Rodriguez. This is his photo, as posted on social media by a user named Deep State Dogs. Rodriguez was part of the mob that attacked police with metal poles and bats and stolen riot shields and chemical spray, and in his case, a stun gun. He attacked Officer Michael Fanone with it, who later suffered a heart attack and traumatic brain injury. Rodriguez pleaded guilty, like so many others have, and was sentenced to 12 and a half years in prison. He's one of the people the former president is calling a hostage. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that Trump is unfamiliar with what a warrior actually is. In case he's watching, here's one from D-Day. Technician 5th grade John J. Pinder Jr. He waded through machine gun and artillery fire, carrying a vitally important radio ashore at Omaha Beach, which he did despite being wounded once, then again making several trips back through enemy fire to get more equipment ashore, until he was wounded a 3rd time and died. Technician Pinder was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously. President Trump refused to visit the same cemetery that President Biden and so many other presidents have over the years, and according to his former chief of staff, Marine Corps General John Kelly, quoted in The Atlantic, he said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." Had he gone, he might have learned what being a warrior truly means. Separately, the former president, now a convicted felon, met by video conference today for a pre-sentencing interview with a New York probation officer. Joining us tonight, former Republican Congressman and House January 6th committee member Adam Kinzinger, also CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller, and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Congressman, first of all, what is your, as somebody who's actually served, what is your reaction to the former president calling the rioters warriors and hostages and victims?
I mean, it's sick and disgusting, obviously. I think we have to be careful to not allow this outrage to just numb us. Like, this really should be, and thank you for putting this at the top of the show, this should be at the top of every news show anywhere in the country at how egregious and terrible this is. They're not warriors. The ones that went into the Capitol, most of them, if not all of them, have been arrested and tried. And interestingly, Anderson, at the beginning, when they started to get arrested, they were remorseful. And then this right-wing ecosphere put their arms around them, singing the national anthem and stuff. And in that process, convinced them that they were victims and have made them martyrs and heroes. This is not something Americans that aren't completely sold out to the cult should accept, and we should have this be a fresh outrage every day when he does stuff like this.
It's also interesting, Andrew. I mean, I know some actual warriors. They're not people who usually view themselves as victims or just sort of helpless victims very often. How dangerous do you think it is for law enforcement, Andrew, and the public when you have the former president gaslighting his supporters? Because, I mean, back in 2022, there was a guy upset about federal authorities searching Mar-a-Lago for classified documents. He was killed after trying to shoot his way into an FBI field office in Ohio. It feels like, to the congressman's point, the former president just says this stuff, and people just kind of ignore it. But it has repercussions potentially.
Yeah, so let's get the facts out first on this Warriors claim. So as of January 6, 2024, which is the most recent numbers I could find, we got 1,265 people charged as a part of that January 6th case. 718 of them by that day had already gone into court, raised their right hand, sworn to tell the truth, and then said, "I did it. I'm guilty." Whether it's trespassing or obstruction of official procedure or assault, on police officers and others. So the idea that these people are somehow being held against their will for political reasons is absolutely absurd. And Donald Trump knows that's absurd. He knows it because he spent 4 hours that day watching the videotapes from behind the cloistered walls of the White House in the warm embrace of his Secret Service security team. So he knows exactly what happened that day. He knows those people were rioters and insurrectionists, and many of them have, to their credit, stepped up and taken responsibility for that. The thing that I cannot get past, Anderson, is how many people give him a pass for saying absurd and sickeningly false things like this. And you're right, these falsehoods that he throws out in front of his rallies and supporters, it is for political advantage, but it comes at the cost of driving up risk to people in the system, law enforcement, prosecutors, and others. And you made the perfect example, Ricky Shiflin, who was outraged by what he undoubtedly heard the president say after the Mar-a-Lago raid and decided to take it out violently on the FBI Cincinnati field office. That could happen any day, anywhere around the country, to any FBI agent or other federal officer by somebody similarly misguided.
Also, Congressman, it's sickening that the former president basically saw the October 7th hostages being held by Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others as a branding opportunity. And I think, according to the Washington Post, in November is when he started using the term hostages for those who have been found guilty of crimes on January 6th, and is branding them January 6th hostages. I mean, it's really warped.
It is really warped, and that was very astute of you to notice, is that he never used hostages until there were real hostages, some of which are still being held, some have been killed, that are being held against their will. I mean, look, I probably started with Marjorie Taylor Greene, too. She came up with some of that. But I think the biggest thing to take off what McCabe said is, where are all the members of the House and Senate, including the ones who, after January 6th, stood up? Lindsey Graham, I'm done with this guy. We had a hell of a run, but I'm done. You think of like Marco Rubio, all these people that know better, that just keep their heads down and don't say a word. This is threatening the very fabric of democracy, because all we have to have for a democracy to survive is a basic compact that your vote, you can vote, your vote will count, and the person that wins wins. That's what Donald Trump was tearing apart, that basic contract that is the only requirement for democracy to survive. And he's turned these people that violated the rule of law into martyrs. And by the way, if we don't have rule of law in this country, democracy can't survive either. And he is just an absolute ill-fit, mentally flawed, is probably the nicest way I can say it, former president and candidate for future president, and America has to reject him.
John, I know you have new reporting on the former president's meeting today, or interview with probation officials, which is a normal part of this procedure. What happened?
So today,